see. All right, we flew in, so that's a good thing. And that's why everything's about 15 or 20 seconds back. I think we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
But I just jinxed myself and just said, we never have a problem with, and then,
knock on wood.
Usual, as usual, right. Our introduction is, hey, are we on? Yeah.
We are on. All right, we are on. Hey, so we are definitely here. On. So, hey, Bobby's here already. Okay, Bobby. Hey, Bob, what's up, brother? So, yeah, welcome, everybody. And Zona's here. Yeah, some people were waiting for us. That's all. That's good. Yeah, they're all finishing up eating their dinner, and they're waiting if they're on the East Coast. So, welcome once again to another live stream here. We got our good friend Charlie Waymire from Ultimate Studios, Inc. back in the house. Charlie, welcome again, brother.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to another chat.
Yeah, where it seems like now we're chatting about every 4 or 5 weeks. One chat on his channel, one chat on our channel, one chat on his channel, and it's kind of cool because what we're trying to do is we're trying to cover maybe some different topics and things that we don't typically talk about and people don't really do on live streams. And tonight's going to be no different because we're going to talk a lot about the recording studio business, starting a studio. Should you start a studio? What the hell would you think if you want to start a studio? What does it cost? All that stuff. And it kind of ties in, Charlie, to what you were doing very recently on your YouTube channel. And by the way, all his information should be in the links in the description box below. So go check out Ultimate Studios, Inc. But you recently did a 10-year anniversary or a series of videos. Yeah. You were going back and showing the building and how you built it out, and then the different, revisions of the setup and all the gear. And that's only happened in the last month or so from what I remember. So it'll be interesting to pick your brain a little bit as you probably now have refreshed your memory going back and looking at that stuff of what the hell it actually took to make that studio that you're sitting in. And that information maybe will be helpful to some of you guys. So feel free to ask questions. And then obviously we have my co-host David S.J. here as well. David, good evening, brother.
Hello.
And if you have not seen it,
I'm just sitting here listening to Lila, so
Oh, cool. Yeah,
she's literally right at my feet.
Yeah.
So
I can hear her
snoring with my eyes open.
I can hear her right under your feet.
We got to get a camera on her one day. Next time you have to have a GoPro.
Yeah,
we'll put her up.
The Delilah cam. Yeah, that'd be good.
We'll put her up in the corner of the screen. So if you guys have seen some of the recent videos, Dave just did an unboxing video on talking about gear, which we'll talk about in a second, the DIY RE stuff. And Dave did an unboxing, and there's 2 videos coming in the next week or so where he actually shows how he put these things together. And that's an interesting watch if you want to learn how to do that. And, and if you say that's too much work, maybe you can hire Dave to build yours for you when you want to go out and buy all the components. So that'll be cool. So stay tuned to that.
Yeah.
And then we have more videos coming up on mixing. We got more videos, some new videos coming up on recording, which we'll talk about in a future cast. But let's start off, because Charlie was showing us off camera some new gear. So let's talk about what do you got new in your studio, Charlie, because I know you bought some new stuff.
Well, I picked up another Trident Decadent 500 rack, and when I was down there the other day, I left with a pair of the new high-lows, the high-low filters that they put out, not just put out, but in fairly recently, and I left with a pair of the 80B EQs as well. Not that I don't have enough of the ADCs on the console, but you can never have too many EQs, right?
Never.
So these are cool because I haven't got to use them a lot yet, but I'm excited because there's besides just high and low filtering, there's a lot of stuff you can do with resonances and have it tracking certain frequencies. So this is going to be kind of a fun experiment. And we are doing videos for Trident on a lot of this stuff that they are putting out on their channels, just short things to show how we've already put some of the plug-in videos out. So you can hear how those sound. We'll be doing all this hardware. I'll be doing more with the console.
Yep.
There's going to be some fun updates on that in the very, very near future. So there's a lot of Trident stuff. And Ernesto's bringing his Rupert Neve stuff because all those channels, I'm going to have 10 channels now. I can't have anything open, of course.
No, I got that problem too.
You're working. You keep looking over like,
I know.
That's bothered me.
Well, not only that,
recording.
If you got to spend 15 or 20 bucks on a blank plate, that's kind of stupid. And then I figure if you don't put a plate on it and it's open, well, then dust and stuff can get in there and ruin my chassis. So I got to fill it with 500 modules.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that just makes total sense. Now, what Neve stuff does Ernesto, what kind of stuff is he bringing in?
The EQ, the Rupert Neve, the EQ and the compressor. I can't remember the numbers. the 535, I think, and the 551. I think the EQ is the 551 and the compressor is the 535. So there's a pair of both of those. And that's going to get used on some mixes going out Tuesday. So I'll probably get a little bit of footage from some of that setup as well. So I'm excited. Those things sound awesome.
Does he have his own studio, or is it just a home studio and then he has stuff there?
He has a home studio setup where he does all his mixing and mastering. He's got the nice outboard, the big Rupert Neve compressor, and the TK Lizer, which both of us love on the mastering side of things. That EQ is fantastic. And he's got a few other things too. He just said recently he hadn't been using those two Ruperts very often, so he's like, hey, do you want to take them and use them? And I couldn't say no to that.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you may as well fill up the rack.
Yeah, and he and I are doing a lot of different things together right now as well, so that'll probably get used on some other stuff coming up. We're trying to finish the final Songs from the Studio episodes of this year. We just have vocals left to do on that song, so that stuff will probably get used on that as well. So,
yeah, and that's something that we won't get to it this time, but the next time I definitely think we want to spend a whole broadcast talking about the Songs from the Studio. Because to me, that's the most. Great. I mean, a lot of your stuff is really impressive. I gotta say that series of stuff is the most impressive thing I've seen you guys do. I mean, because I know what goes into that, and that is an enormous amount of work. And the fact that you can actually pull it off, and the production quality is pretty high level too. I mean, it's not just whipped together.
We have our mistakes here and there just because we're wearing so many hats. But overall, it comes off great. There's some. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to work out the rest of the bugs so we don't have the little things that probably make me more angry than anybody else. But
I would love.
Yeah, next time around, I'd love to talk about all that because that's
talk about
that's a giant labor of love.
You got a bunch of GoPros in there. Maybe you can have a couple of GoPros set up. You could show us because you got a pretty fancy setup and all the cameras in the live room, and I mean it's just really. When I first saw it, I was like, wow, because I started building out our system over here with 4 or 5 cameras for mixing, but we're static. We're just sitting in front of a console and moving over to one set of hardware racks. And when I saw what you guys were doing, running around, you had cameras everywhere, and you guys are not only producing the stuff video-wise, but you're doing all the audio, and then half the time you guys are playing on the track, at least co-writing the songs. So you're not just working with an artist, you're actually in the band or whatever, you guys are working on. So that's crazy.
It's crazy. A lot to try to keep track of.
Right. Right. And the fact that you can hear everything and you can see everything throughout the whole session is like, wow, I can't believe there's not a camera we forgot to turn on or a microphone.
Oh no, that's happened. Both of those things.
Because that's crazy.
Yes. I mean, RX has been my friend a few times, and it's.
Oh right.
Oh yeah. I mean, don't get me started. We'll save that for the next one, man, because there's so many production things we can talk about from that. I can tell you about everything to look out for.
I was going to say, let's not blow the whole thing today, okay?
No, we won't. But definitely, guys in the chat, go to Ultimate Studios Inc., the YouTube channel, and just look at his Songs from the Studio series if you want to know what we're talking about. So the next time we come back around, you'll have a feel. Go watch some of them. The songs are really great, and the production's really, really cool. And so that'll be a lot of fun to talk about. But yeah, what I want to talk about this time with you, Charlie, is something came up in our live stream on our other channel the other night. And then I've gotten this email a few times over the last 4 or 5 weeks where people have asked me about, they want to start a recording studio, like a commercial, get out of their little home thing and go to a more commercial studio. And the topic around, is it even worth opening up? So, a studio, what does it cost and all that? So the first question is, and I'll ask you, I mean, you have a studio, you've been doing it 10 years. What is both of your guys' opinion on, is it even worth opening up a commercial room in this day and age, 2022, 2023?
I think I have a problem with the word commercial because most people tend to associate that word with the big studios, right?
Yeah,
and consider anything that is commercial to be kind of in that category. And I don't really think that's the case. Because, I mean, do we need another fast food restaurant? Do you need another clothing bar? Do you need any of these things that go up all the time, and some work and some don't? And I don't think a commercial, and I'm going to use quotes because I don't consider myself commercial here, even though I'm the same size as some studios here in town that they would consider commercial. But I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to the services you offer, and how well you can get people in the door. Do we need spaces to have musicians create together? I think is a better question, or a better way of putting it. And the answer that I have to that is emphatically yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Dave, what do you think? What is your opinion?
I think it's more of a market thing to me. Is like if you're in an area that has a pretty burgeoning music scene, then the opportunity is there to open some kind of a space for musicians to create. But if you don't have a really strong music scene, you're just throwing money away, because like where I am here, I'm in the lower Hudson Valley in New York, Orange County area. And we do not have a very strong music scene here. And there have been studios that have opened and disappeared within 6 months to a year. There was one studio in the next town over where they had more rehearsal spaces than they did recording spaces, and they did okay for a while, but then that went away too.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, I think it's more of a market thing. I mean, in LA, where there's a very strong music scene, or in Nashville or someplace like that, yeah, I think a room is another room is going to have at least a shot to be successful. But if you're in an area where you don't have a strong music scene, you really don't have it.
I think it depends on how you market it, because I have several friends that have studios way outside of town, like not easy to get to. And I even have some friends in Connecticut, the same thing, that do quite well. And they are remote at best. But they have marketed themselves in such ways to get the type of clients that want to go get away and do things. I mean, of course, there's a lot of variables to this. There's a ton.
Sure.
There is no one way to do it anywhere you are. But I think it really comes down to how you present yourself, what you offer, and can you get the kind of client that you want? Because if you're remote, like in an area, Dave, like you're at, that maybe doesn't have as much of a music scene, if you open something up there, you have to be able to bring a client from further away.
Right.
So how do you make that happen? One, is it financially smart? I don't know. Maybe if you've been in the business already a while, like Eric Valentine just moved to the East Coast and is building a new studio. I don't think he's going to have a problem,
No, certainly not.
But he's been around a long time.
Yeah, it's like
but
you
don't
say too.
Have to be. Sorry, go ahead.
But that's a marketing thing too. Eric Valentine has a pretty strong root system set up where people are going to seek him out. I mean, where I am too. I mean, we've had like famous studios have been around here. I mean, we had the Bearsville studio here for years. That's shut down and gone. Now there's a guy living in that place now. A guy's living room is the former live room.
Be a fun home.
So like I say, I mean, like this, it's to me, the music scene is a fluid thing, and like around here, I used to be able to go out on a Saturday night and see a live show. I'd have 3 or 4 or 5 choices. Now, nothing. There's nothing to even go see. So so like I say, I mean, I think it's more scene oriented than it is anything else. But that's my opinion.
But I don't think it's limited to only the big metropolitan areas. Because like I said, I do have multiple friends that are nowhere near those areas doing quite well with their studios. I mean, sometimes it ends up being, I think you have to offer services that don't always require people to be there, so you kind of offset things. So maybe you are remote, but you have a cool space and people dig you as a person and your workflow, so they'll come stay with you for a couple days and do some work there, and then the rest can be done kind of remotely. Because even studios here in LA are doing more remote work as well. A lot of my friends that have spots that are great do a fair amount of remote work that used to be done in person. So I agree with you on the fluid part of it, for sure. But I think you could say that with a lot of businesses. But like I said, I think we tend to look at this word commercial as some big, fancy, place that you had to have a ridiculous amount of money to open. And I can tell you, when I built this place, I had a lot less money than you think.
We're going to get to that. I think when I hear commercial, I agree. That's probably what most people think. I guess my definition of a commercial room would be a place large enough to where you could put groups of musicians, and not that you couldn't do that in your home, but also I think the only way, at least again, I'm in Connecticut, but the only way, and there's not a lot of studios left here anymore. I know Eric's coming this way, but there's not a lot of the studios here have shut down. I think when people ask me that question, my first thing is, okay, most people that ask me this question are starting from zero. Because most people are, I'm in a day job and I'm about to retire. I'm in a day job and I hate my boss and I want to go do this. And I'm like, okay, well, you're not going to go from a day job and you're an absolute nobody, no matter how talented you may be, that nobody knows you, the whole marketing side. And then you know, 2 months later, you're making whatever you were making at your day job. I guess that could happen, but that's probably pretty slim to none. I don't recommend that. You probably have to have some roots already built into the music scene or the music business, whether it's online or otherwise. But to me, if you're going to open up again, I use that word loosely, commercial room or a place where you could bring people outside of your house, that's, you know, you have to be able to offer something to people that people don't already have, right?
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to laugh. She is like right at my feet.
She fell asleep as soon as you put her down.
She is just snoring, man.
Yeah,
but yeah, to your point, David, I agree with you on that. That if you're just starting out from scratch, it's something if you want to do it, you got to probably have it as a side hustle for a while and get it going and see what you can do with it and see what your area needs.
Right.
You know,
because if you're just another person that just has a laptop and a couple of speakers and a DAW and maybe one or two pieces of outboard gear, I don't know from a business perspective, because I mean, we're going to talk about what does it not only cost to start it, but what are the running costs of a studio, and what you got to bring people in order to make money to do that. And unless there's something unique, why, again, I think you said it, why would people come to you? Okay, let's put talent aside. So you're a talented guy. There are a lot of talented people around. But what are they going to get from your spot that they're not going to get just going to any old spot? In whether it's a cool vibe, whether it's a certain kind of gear or a console, or just something about your thing that you just can't get anywhere, or the average home studio person doesn't own or have because, they just can't for space reasons, financial reasons, or both. And so when someone says, is it worth opening one up? I say, well, it's worth opening one up if you're going about it the right way and you have some of maybe the built-in experience, or you have an idea, or you could bring something to the table that it's going to attract people outside of the fact that, well, I'm a recording studio, right? I mean, because so what?
Yeah, just that alone is not enough now.
Right. At least I wouldn't think so. So, I mean, talking about, you just said it, when you started your studio, and I know it's a while ago, so money's different today, but when someone asked me the other night, because he just asked me, well, how much would you need to open up a studio? And I said, $100,000. And 100 grand. I said, well, if it was me, and I have a built-in business, so if I was going to even take this and move it somewhere and bring in clients, because I don't work with clients in-house anymore, but if I wanted to do that outside of my home, part of that $100,000 for me, if I'm starting a business, is I want a year's worth of expenses up front before I open up day one. So I know that I'm not under the gun and I got to make money the day I turn the lights on, because the rent's coming, that kind of a thing, especially if you're new in an area and you don't have a reputation that people know about and you have to start really from ground zero. So I said that in Connecticut, that's probably 40 to 50 grand of the 100 grand is probably a year's worth of rent and utilities, depending on the space and geographic location and all of that stuff. And then if you were building if you just got like a big open warehouse with nothing in it and you had to build it out, you're probably, unless you could do all the work yourself, you're probably looking at 40 to 50 grand to build out a space, unless you're really, really handy. So Charlie, when you did yours, like I know I saw your videos. I mean, it was basically it was a box that you kind of went in and you went in and built. So what, I know you did a lot of the work yourself, and you were, getting, buying used sheetrock, and you were getting stuff off job sites, and you were doing all kinds of stuff to save money. Roughly, what do you remember what was that bill by the time you were done just to build it out?
You're not going to believe me. We did about 20 grand.
But you did a lot, right? That's great. But you did a lot of that work yourself, because you're a handy guy.
Well, that's the caveat to this. My situation anyway is I am a very DIY person. I just jump in, and do things. So when this came about, I knew I was going to have to do most of the work myself. And I have a little bit of a background. My grandfather was like a master carpenter. So I spent, in high school and in middle school, I worked with him a lot. So I learned a lot of the skills I needed. On top of that, I had a really good friend of mine that happened to be a former student of mine at Musicians Institute that's a contractor and a drummer and was willing to be nuts and go build this thing with me. So we did 90% of that work was done ourselves. Well, I hired his crew for some of the drywall and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because that's just, insane to do yourself, especially in some sort of timely fashion. And it took us about 3 months total to get everything to where it actually opened, working with the first iteration of everything. But the only way I was able to do it at that price is I had to do the work, the majority of it. And I don't know if I would do that again. I don't mind doing work. I don't think I'd start to finish by myself again the next time around, because you have to have the time. To your point about rent is, you sign the lease, and I was lucky. The owner of the complex that I'm here, that he gave me, I can't remember initially, 4 or 5 months free on the initial lease. We negotiated a type of thing. It's like, look, I'm building this out in your complex, everything. I need a little bit of time. And he was very, very cool. So I had a little bit of a leeway there so I could just pour everything in. But I had to stop working at my own studio. So I went to the clients I had and went, look, here's what I'm doing. I really need to focus on this, because I was still teaching at MI 3 days a week and then working at the old studio. Luckily, everybody was cool. And I just put it all on hold for 3 months. And if I wasn't teaching, I was here working. We were doing easily 18-hour, 20-hour days. And Mike was too. He'd go do his contractor job, grab dinner, come work with me till 2 or 3 in the morning. And then get up at 6 a.m. to go do his normal job.
Right. And then that would still cost you around 20 grand, and you're doing all the work. So if you're not doing all the work, right.
And like you said a second ago, I spent a lot of time on Craigslist. And finding other job sites that were selling stuff. Like the drywall, I got I think that initial buy from that job site, I got about 88 sheets of drywall at $4 a sheet.
Yeah, that's a third of the price. I mean, at that time,
that helped. Those things helped.
Sure. That's a point. There's 2 points that I want to make into that one too. It's like 10 years ago, $20,000 is $40,000 today. Right off the bat, at your 20,000, and like I said, you did the legwork to find all the stuff at bargain prices, and if you didn't have the opportunity to find that, you would have had to spend it on something else,
and that took time too. To find those deals, it didn't just happen.
Right.
Yeah, and but then the other side of building a studio is there's the actual physical space build out. But then there's the equipping the studio.
Yeah, we were going to get there to that. That's assuming most of your equipment. I mean, I know we're always buying stuff, but you had a studio, a smaller room, a home studio, whatever. You brought a good portion of gear into your new building. You didn't start from scratch.
No, everything came with me, and I had a fair amount of gear already. It wasn't all top line, wasn't near what I have now, but it was all functional, and I made a lot of good recordings with it. And there was no console. It was all
there was no console back there. Right, outboard and DAW. Right.
Exactly.
Right. So you had a lot of the gear. So, and again, I think some of the people that are asking us these questions, they have some gear. They're already doing something, whether it's for clients or hobby or both, and they got some stuff. So maybe gear isn't part of that build equation. So, like Dave said, that money's probably doubled today. So then, and I wasn't far off then when I said 100 grand. And I would just do that number out of the air. I just went, well, I want expenses covered. $100,000.
And that's just to establish the space.
Establish the space, put the gear in it. Right.
Yep.
So
and that's a good point to make, Dave. Is that money went only? You're right, only towards the build. It was drywall in here. It was framing. It was glass. It was the initial wiring, the initial panels I built. That was just pretty much the skeleton of the building.
How big is your studio? Square footage, Charlie, roughly?
About 1,600 total.
Okay, so it's a good sized space.
That's
It's
a good
decent
sized room. Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
so again, that's commercial. We're not, like you said, commercial. We're not talking about Blackbird Studios. We're talking
Right.
about something that's
I mean,
bigger than
maybe
the
I'm
average home.
semantics when I say that, but it's not. I'm not East West.
No,
Studio
but
A
you're not.
there, studio.
Right. But you're not a home studio. Home studio is usually not 1,600 square feet, typically.
Right. Yeah.
You're in between a multi-million-dollar place and the average home studio, which is in a 12 by 12 space.
Yeah, that would be fair to say. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said too, just to one point I wanted to make too, like the word commercial. I mean, I know the word of commercial studio does raise the idea of a big, label related type of a studio, but to me, commercial is anything that's going to make money.
Anything that you have to pay for. I mean, you're paying the overhead, and when I think commercial, I think, well, there's overhead costs. I mean, there's overhead in your house, but like for me, I'm in a home studio, and yes, it costs me money to be down here. The electric's a little higher and stuff, but it's not. I pay a mortgage. I don't pay a mortgage and then rent to a bit. You know what I'm saying? So when I think commercial, I'm thinking of a landlord or rent or a mortgage. If you bought a building, you have utilities, you got common fees, you got insurances, you got all those things that you don't typically need in a home studio, or it's already in a wrapper around your home life.
I mean, the cost is still there,
but it's
You're
a
just
lot
calling it
less.
something.
But it's
Well, it
less.
depends on your house.
Well, in my house, it's less.
Yeah.
I guess if I was in Puff Daddy's house, it wouldn't be less.
It'd be different. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So before you get him, Zonas says he's in a home studio right now, low overhead. But yeah, I get it. I mean, I'm in about my space, if you include all the rooms, when I was tracking people here, is probably around 800 square feet. But it's kind of
that's still there's a
no,
lot
you could
you
do a
can
lot.
do in that.
Oh, I would record. I've had a 10-piece band in here one time recording. I mean, 10 pieces is tight. It isn't easy, but we made a great record. You can do it. But look, the overhead is lower. I mean, there is some cost associated with it, but you're right, it is lower.
Yeah.
And Kay Pitchford says, wouldn't it depend on the studio services offered?
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because,
certainly.
you could consider, if we're going to go off the idea that a commercial space is something not in a house, you could have a commercial space that specialized in vocal production.
Sure.
Or something which is quite common in a lot of places too. It's not as big. Again, if you know your market, if there's more of that around, singer-songwriters, vocalists, that could be an option. I think identifying your services and what you do best is the important thing.
Yeah, no doubt. Zona says, don't quit your day job until you have so many clients you can't handle both. That's what I tell people when I do a lot of business coaching. And that's why I say, do it as a side. I think Charlie said, do it as a side hustle. I did it as a side hustle for, a long time. It was many, many years before I walked away from a corporate gig to do this full time. And it took, it took a good 5 or 6 years of, working all day and then coming home and working night and weekends with bands and artists and marketing and all of that, to where there was so much work, I couldn't take it all anymore. And then that was kind of when I made the switch. But I tell people all the time, I wouldn't walk away from a job that you hate. And this came up a lot, obviously, when we first had COVID, there were a lot of shutdowns, and I knew a lot of students that lost their jobs, unfortunately. And they're like, oh, now I want to do this now. I don't have a job. I need to make money. I'm like, well, how much money do you need to make? And well, I need to make like $3,000 or $4,000 a month. I'm like, well, when you're starting out and you haven't done anything, that's an enormous amount of money, just because nobody knows who you are. And unless you know people or have an in or have relationships with artists or whatever, I don't know how you can recoup that money on day one. It's just not possible.
No, that is very, very, very unlikely that's going to happen. And, for me, I wouldn't have, I did things a little bit differently. I got to the point with my job that I had, my teaching gig, to where I hit the end of my rope with it. I had a fair amount of work in here. The first 6 or so years, there were, good month, bad month.
Yeah.
Good month or two, bad month, so it was really volatile. But I got to the point where I was done with my job. I was doing the teaching gig, and I walked in one day and I just quit.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I came out and I'm like, I guess I have no choice now.
Right.
I would not recommend this to someone as a way to do things unless you're a little crazy.
Right.
Or a lot crazy in my case. But to me, I'm more of that person that just goes. So at that point, I had no choice.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, within about 2 months, a lot of things changed. And I realized that where I was with the job that I had, and I'd been there a long time, and I was done, there was a weight from that was definitely affecting how I was running my business. And when that weight was gone, everything opened up.
Everything changed. Right.
Yeah. I don't know if like I said, I wouldn't recommend someone doing that. I think the way you coach people to do it is a much smarter way.
Well, I also think it has to do with
sometimes jumping in with both feet isn't necessarily the wrong thing either.
No, it's not. I guess for me, I always ask, well, what is your life situation? So if you're 25, no married, no kids, no mortgage, no responsibilities, and you only got to feed yourself and you live in a little apartment, that's one that you take the jump, because if you're young enough, it doesn't work out. You got time to make a shift. When I did it, I was married with a newborn. So, I mean, with a mortgage. And so there's, a wife was working, but, it all depends what your lifestyle currently is. And can you afford that? Do you have, and that's why we said, it's going to take $100,000. I want a year's worth of operating expenses. Do you have that kind of cash? If you do, and you're willing to take a chance, then, so it really depends on your lifestyle.
I didn't.
Yeah, no.
I didn't have close to that. And I was almost 40. I was 30, was that 10 years ago? I was 39. So I was, no spring chicken. I mean, I know I look young, but
you look 20.
That's all the makeup from the computer.
Right.
It's all that good living.
I put them on.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's all that good living, It's all good,
I mean, I definitely didn't. The way I did things and took the chance and jumped in, definitely not the way most people would advise. And I probably wouldn't even advise it either, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Unless, like I said, you're just kind of crazy, but which is me in a nutshell.
Well, and the other thing,
I definitely broke a lot of rules.
And you also have to have, and you do, and this is the other part of that. If you're going to do that, you have to have an insane amount of work ethic and drive and focus to take something from absolutely nothing and build it into something in a reasonable amount of time, in any amount of time. But if you're trying to shorten down that timeline because you need to make the jump, or you want to make the jump, or you're 40 and you're not getting any younger, you got to really let the chains off. And you can't be a lazy person. You can't do that in many successful business anyway, but I would say, especially in the music industry, because it is so competitive, that you have to have an insane amount of discipline and drive. And so that's why I always tell people the side hustle is great, because even though, yes, it sucks, you're going to work an 8-hour day at a job you hate, to come home and work 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 hours at night, 6 days a week. If you're not driven enough or disciplined enough to put up with that for a period of time,
then you're not going to run a studio.
You're not going to be able to run a studio, because you're just not. And so that's why I tell people, because this business is a sexy business. It looks great. We're music, man. We're, songs in the studio. It looks like a lot of fun. But what goes on behind the scenes to make all that work is an enormous amount of work. And if you have to make a living, it is a lot of pressure that you have to bring money in the door, because it costs a certain amount of money to run this place. And so that kind of leads me into, and it's going to differ depending on location, size of studio, the deal you worked out. But there is a monthly running cost to running one of these places. I mean, everything from rents to utilities and, insurances and everything else.
And I happen to live in a very expensive city, which makes it even harder. I mean, it's not cheap to have space like this here. It's gone up considerably, obviously, since I got the place 10 years ago. But LA in general, about, I don't know, 6 years ago or so, had about a 40% jump across the board, across the city in commercial spaces and buildings. I mean, just the cities, boom. And now the pricing, the monthly, the yearly price, I just signed my next, fairly long lease here. So I know what I'm at for the next 7 or so years, and it's
Right.
Okay.
up. I mean, I have a favorable deal. It is not cheap still, though. I am cheaper than other parts of town, and that probably goes to also the person that owns the building being a very fair person, which is not the normal for owners of big complexes like this that let you do this out here. Not the normal at all.
Really?
I'm in a very good spot in that sense. So he's always been willing to kind of to work with me, which is great. I mean, his son's an attorney and has done some work for me, and he's even recorded here because he's a musician also. So I got the good in there. But it's still it's not cheap, and you have to factor in. I mean, if we're on the cost thing now of the monthly, it's not only just what it costs this month, but if you have a lease of any sort, you have to factor in where that's going over the however many years you have that lease for. And it's not just the monthly rent that goes up, all the other bills around it, all your utilities, your power, your water, all of that goes up. Even internet to a certain degree. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know if this is the same way where you guys are, but here I can only get commercial internet, which is not even as fast as, like, Ernesto's got his home studio. His internet kicks our ass over here.
Oh, wow, really?
I'm twice the freaking money.
Yeah.
Just because it's business. But they're like, you get prioritized lines. This is a whole other, I won't get on this rant, but But stuff like that, I didn't consider that when I moved in. I just thought, internet, I'll be able to get whatever. And all of a sudden it's like, I got less choices there. Oh, and it's twice the money. Well, that expense is going up. And you get things like that maybe in the beginning, now I'm aware of, because those little things add up really fast. I mean, I need to do a little over $5,000 to break even, with all my expenses for everything.
For the month.
That's lower than I expected it to be. Yeah, that's lower than I thought it would be.
Well, I'm thrifty.
I guess.
That's you're right. That's probably $5,000 all in for the month. That's utilities, rent, and the whole deal. That's actually you're right. Yeah. That's probably lower than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But that's not food. That's not coffee in the coffee machine up there. That's not anything else other than just bare bones.
That's coming in, turning the lights on.
Yeah. And some of that goes to where I'm at. So at the time that I got in, this area in the valley was way cheaper than the rest of LA. I mean, I spent about a month. I think I looked at 200 places. Maybe, I'd have days where I'd go to 3 or 4. And then sometimes I was just looking and making phone calls. But I looked at some that were built out that even 10 years ago wanted $3,000 to move in and $3,000 a month. And it was half the size of what I have here. Wow. I don't even want to know what that costs now. It's got to be ridiculous,
Right.
Yeah.
So I got into a spot. It was a little further out than I wanted, which turned out not to be a big deal at all. I was a little worried that I'm still only, even from Hollywood, with traffic, it's a half hour. With no traffic, it's 15 minutes. So it's not bad. And it has not affected me really at all being where I'm at. But because I got in back then when I did, at the prices that it was, and I got lucky with who I'm leasing from, it's helped me keep the cost down into something very manageable.
So if you were starting that today, like if you were just moving in today and getting a typical place, that 5,000 would be 8,000 or 9,000, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I was saying, when I said 50, 60 grand a year in expenses, that's about right.
In the studio.
What's that?
Yeah. I wouldn't be doing a studio here in LA if I had to pay that going out. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Gotcha.
So a lot of it was the timing and the situation, which again will vary greatly. So I guess it is possible. But there you go. So thinking again, you're in LA, but we're in Connecticut. That's not much different cost of living wise. I think you're the second highest cost of living state in the country. We're the third. I mean, so it's very reasonable. The coasts are pretty reasonable. Price wise are pretty the same. So you're looking at a minimum of 5,000 probably a month if you want a halfway decent space and a halfway decent area. You could probably start with that number, and it could go as maybe as high as 10 grand a month. So so now we're talking about, even on Charlie's, and if you're thrifty, you can do all the work, and you can shop on Craigslist for used spackle and sheetrock. You're probably looking at 40 to 50 grand to build out a space that's roughly 1,500 square feet. If you were going into a box and had to build it all out, right? That doesn't include any gear. And now you're talking
And
about 50
just
grand.
here,
Yep.
real quick on that point on the building side too. I think something is important is the expectation of what you're building also. Because I didn't cut too many corners here, but the build itself is fairly straightforward. It is not.
Yeah.
I don't have a bunch of complicated angles that we did crazy things with. It's pretty utilitarian. The overall build itself. I've done a lot since then to change that and improve it, but the expectation of what you get if you are in an area that's like, say you are getting a commercial space that has a lot of noise around you, it could be machine shops, it could be airports, it could be trains, it could be whatever, busy intersection.
Right. Build outs
What
more.
what you have to do to get the isolation that you need, like if you are doing voiceover for TV or movies,
Oh, yeah. It's going to be dead silent.
you need dead silent.
That's right.
So that build is different, or where you have to put your like if that was the street that way, I might have to go further that way to isolate,
Right.
Or it might have to be completely 100% floated. And even a small room 100% floated costs a lot of money.
Right.
So the expectation of what you're trying to do. Where I am, just to relate it to where I'm at, I'm on a cul-de-sac. So during the day we have traffic, and of course it's all businesses around me. So you got your FedEx and your UPS. The train tracks are only about 500 yards away. Not even 500 yards. Not that far.
Okay.
But there's an hour. It's at night between a couple hours is the only time that's an issue, and it's late.
That's
And
good.
it doesn't. It happens in small spurts, and it's usually when the trains are idling. When they're going by, not idling, we don't notice them at all.
Oh,
But when
great.
they
Okay.
idle, oh
Yeah.
my Lord, do they push it in? But
Yeah.
I've done
Yeah.
Yeah.
drum tracks while that's happening, and we never knew. But
Oh,
I've been
okay.
doing an acoustic guitar track, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I hear the trains. Let's everybody
Right.
take a 10-minute break.
Yeah, right.
And
Right.
minutes go by, it's not an issue. Because I didn't float the floors here. I did not retrofit the building that way. I
Right.
have cut around the entire building. I have had 2 separate cuts of the concrete and the asphalt. Because there's also a machine shop across the alley from me. Not a very big one. He's only got a couple machines, but when he does big jobs, it can be problematic. So I had a company come out, and we literally cut everything directly around my building, all the way through the concrete and the asphalt. And then we did another cut all the way around the building is on the other side of my alley. So we severed the direct connection of
Interesting.
the pavement.
Yeah,
Which was a lot cheaper to do
decoupled
than I thought it was
yourself.
going to be.
Yeah, that
You
sounds like that.
decoupled
Yeah,
yourself
that's the
from
word
the
I was
other
looking for.
buildings.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like that would be a fortune to do. I don't know. It just sounds like,
It
well, that's
wasn't.
expensive.
Actually, between the 2 different cuts, it was less than $1,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I would have
Yeah.
thought, yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's
Because they charge
that's
by
a day
time
rate
and feet.
thing. Yeah.
So we had the foot, how many feet they were going to have to cut. So I knew that cost right away.
Yep.
And then because it was a pretty straightforward cut around the building. It always took less than an hour. So you had an hourly rate out of the gate, which was like 150 or 160. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't a cheap hourly rate,
Yeah.
but since I only needed 1 hour, and then they added how long the cut was on it, it's like the first one was like 450. The second one was around 425, something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was that to me was way cheaper than some of the other things I did.
Yeah.
So the expectation of where your building is, what you're competing with of your outside noises, because you might not need as much isolation if you're in a quiet area, which changes what your build could be. Like even my very back room, I'm getting ready to have the ceiling finished. I am not going to go full on crazy with that ceiling because it's far enough away from anything in the front. And I've got big parking lot, and then residential area on the other side of the parking lot. My noise competition back there is next to nothing.
Right.
So even
Right.
with it unfinished in the ceiling right now, I use it as an ISO booth all the time with very little issues. So I'm not going to go spend $5,000 retrofitting that entire room. I'm going to do a few things to make it a little bit better, and I'm going to go right back to work.
Right. That makes sense. So before I move on to clients and charging, because that's the next thing that's going to come up. Now that you've spent the money, you got a space, and you know about what your monthly costs are going to be, well, now the next step is, well, we got to make money. But so if anyone has any questions before we move on to that topic, Kay Pitchford asks, Are either of you investing in advertising and marketing? And if so, what percentage of your operating budget is it?
I do 0 now.
Yeah, me as well.
Okay, let's clarify that a little bit. As far as traditional advertising, I do 0. For a couple of years I spent, I don't know if I know an actual percentage, but it was, 10 grand a year doing Facebook ads and all of that stuff for most of the time 0 return. Or a lot of the gigs that brought in were gigs that just wanted to lowball you on pricing, or it was the type of gigs that I definitely say no to now because they will be 5 times more work than anything else. So my advertising now, and curious if both of you guys kind of agree with this, is my YouTube channel and the time that I invest in doing the work I do there.
Yeah.
That is what I consider my advertising. And then the work I do with the clients that are in the room on regular sessions. Word of mouth has always been better to me. I mean, it's not even a contest. It's really
that's
word of mouth.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is that your business is more word of mouth because you're offering a service at a level where you have a large segment of the market that's going to be interested in what you're doing. And word gets around that you're, super chill guy to work with and you do good work, then, you're going to attract clients that way. The YouTube channel is exposure, not advertising to me. You know what I mean? It's more exposure.
To me, that's kind of semantics because those things are the same thing to me in a lot of ways. Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you there, but the effort I would put into trying to advertise for people to see my work is doing my work on, YouTube and everything, and then I share that. So, I don't know. I'm not gonna disagree with you on that one because I don't think you're wrong. I just think that is also exposure and advertising. A lot of the times are very similar.
Yeah, I think his question is around paying for advertising, like you say, Facebook ads and traditional ways of marketing. And I did early on as well. I tried all of that, and I'm not glad to hear that you weren't successful at it either, because I thought I was the only one that spent all that money and didn't get anything from it. I wish you would have, just because I feel bad for you. But I've spent an enormous amount of money over the years trying, because again, as a business, part of this, when you're, unless you're a big business with teams and departments of people doing a lot of this stuff, most times you're a one man or one woman or a couple of people show. And so, my background is not in internet marketing and advertisement. So you end up trying a bunch of different things to try to get your name out there. And I've done everything from YouTube ads, Facebook ads. I've hired social media marketing people for periods of time. And I spent thousands and thousands of dollars, and the ROI on that was 0. I mean, really, I've never really saw any uptick in my website traffic, maybe a little bit, maybe I got a couple, like you said, a couple of inquiries about some work, and most of that stuff was on the low end of stuff. And most times those things didn't even pan out because they didn't want it. Like you said, they wanted the low ball, and it wasn't even worth taking the work on necessarily. So I don't spend any traditional money other than, money it costs to have a website, obviously, and those costs, but those are minimal. My biggest advertisements or exposure is the same. It's YouTube. That's my largest fishing net from everything from working with clients and selling online education. It's mostly from YouTube. And you can say, well, that doesn't cost you anything. But like you said, Charlie, in a way, it does. It's hours. It's the most amount of time that I spend between projects is YouTube. There's 2 things I do: work with clients and YouTube. That's really about it.
I'm exactly the same as that.
Right? And
I mean, in a lot of ways, what I'm doing is very similar to what you're doing. And then when Ernesto and I is like this, very similar to what you and Dave are doing.
Yeah.
I know exactly where you're coming from.
Right. So I don't spend a lot of money on marketing just because it never really panned out. And I know people that have done it and that they say it works. It's never worked for me. I don't know why.
I know more that have done it and it didn't do anything than I do the opposite of that.
Yeah. So that's why I don't do it anymore. So it's not part of my operating budget as far as it's not a bill that comes and I pay some marketing person or whatever. So definitely not.
Time is something you have to, I think we overlook sometimes, pun intended, I guess, because it's the one thing you can't get that back. You know, you
Right.
can
Yeah.
make money back
Yeah.
eventually. Even, you know, the 10 or 15 or 20 grand or whatever I spent in 2019 on Facebook I can make that back at some point. You know, that's not a huge deal. But spending your time wisely and as best you can to build your business is the one thing you can't get back. So trying to make sure that you're spending that time wisely from the get-go is really, really important. You know, whether
Yeah.
it's you got your regular job and it's your side hustle so you can build it in and you invest those hours after. That's the whole Gary Vee thing, man. And it's
Yeah.
one of the things I totally agree with him. If you want to do your own thing, you have to be willing to put those hours in, and it can pay off. It doesn't always, but there's more likely to pay off if you're willing to put that time in wisely, because you're not getting that time back. So
Right,
that
and,
to me,
yeah.
you know, YouTube is a big time investment. I don't make
Huge.
direct money from YouTube. I make like next to
I don't-
nothing, but I do get gigs
Neither do
from
I.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get
Yeah.
gigs from it. I don't make any. I mean, make some ad money, but it's like laughable when you break it down by the. I don't even think I've ever tried to figure out what I'm really getting paid per hour, because it would just be disappointing. But
Yeah.
it's it's barely going out to dinner a couple of times a month. It's nothing really in the big
Yeah.
scheme of things. But it is a way to get that exposure, as Dave said, and it has gotten me a lot of gigs. And it people know who I mean. What we're doing right now is a form of advertisement.
Yeah.
I mean, we're hanging
Absolutely.
out, but we're hanging out publicly on YouTube because people are
Right.
going to learn about us that don't already know about us already. Mike asks, would be going immersive be a good marketing tool? You specialize. I don't know that I understand.
If you specialize in immersive music, would marketing yourself as an immersive music type of thing be a good marketing tool? And well, yeah.
That's an interesting topic. That specifically, I think, is an interesting topic right now, because the whole immersive experience, whether it's Atmos, whether it's the Apple immersive or any of that stuff, is one, in its infancy in music. Two, there's no guarantee that is going to stick around. And there's a lot of debate among some really good engineers of whether or not that's going to stick around in the music world. If you are talking movies and that sort of thing, that's going to be around.
Right.
Putting all your eggs in that basket,
I wouldn't do it.
I would not do it personally, because I am not convinced that that's going to be going to take the music world by storm, because we've had multiple versions of this already try, and every single one has not only failed, but miserably, because of the way we listen to music.
Right. And I mean, I can think about, quad, what the hell is I thinking of the word?
Quadraphonic.
I mean, wasn't
sound.
that? Remember that?
That was that's going to revolutionize music, and then 2 years later, you never heard the word again.
Right.
So part of that too
going
is
back to Laserdisc and all that, there were all that high-end stuff.
Yeah.
You had your 5.1 stuff, you had all this stuff, and it's never stuck with music.
Right. And I think I think also too, and I think right now when you talk about Dolby Atmos, like I see, again, you could see the Bob Clear Mountains and the Cliff Lord Algaes, but the amount of money that they're
Clear
sinking
Mountain
in.
doesn't. His take, at least what I've seen recently, is he doesn't think it's going to stick. He
haven't heard
him,
him-
but he doesn't think it's going to stick.
I haven't heard
From
him say
music
that
specifically.
But I know the amount of and those guys are in a different level, right? They're working with different types of artists, certainly. But the amount of upfront even installation costs and the way that the rooms have to be set up to work that way, I got to imagine are ungodly expensive, the way these guys are trying to do it. And I think too, where it makes sense for at that level, like, because you said movies, like live DVDs. I think Bob Clearmount was doing some Stone stuff where they were doing a couple of live performances in that Dolby Atmos stuff, and I said, oh, that makes sense to me.
Yep.
Yeah, a visual experience with that kind of a thing, that makes sense. And I know that there are some classic artists that are now they're going back and redoing some of their older popular catalog in that new format. But again, I think it's still brand new, and we're talking about levels of people who have the money to put into trying this experiment. As far as in the masses, I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
that's the interesting thing. That's the interesting thing, is how many people are going to wire their houses up to be able to take advantage of an Atmos recording. You know, how many people are going to be willing
Right.
to put that kind of investment into their entertainment
that is
room?
going to be that right there is going to be what makes it or breaks it. It's not whether we all can put it in our studios and do that sort of work. It's going to be, is there going to be a listener that wants that? And some of the
Yeah.
immersive with the turning your head and hearing things different, that is not a music experience that most people want on a daily basis. So those
Correct,
kind
yeah.
of things to me are still kind of fringe. They'll have
Yeah.
their uses. I think some of this will fall into different places and maybe
Yeah.
work for different things. I could see that for some live
Well, yeah.
streaming being really cool.
Yeah,
But-
or imagine going to a movie theater and watching a movie where you've got the
Right.
sound not coming from just all around you, but from above and below you as well.
Or what about
You
a
know?
live concert? I know
Yes.
there are
Yeah.
some
Yep.
places in Vegas looking into this immersive live experience.
Yeah,
You know,
I like to think.
starting
Yeah,
song. That could be great.
I think there'll be some
Yep.
some cool things like that, but I still think you were right. The average person, our music today, who sits in a living room and listens to music anymore? Most people listen to music on earbuds with their phone, mobile, portable. And even though the earbuds and they're making headphones now that can kind of simulate some of that stuff kind of happening. I've listened to a couple of those things. I wasn't really impressed with it, but I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
I think it's too far out to know. And I think maybe if 5 years from now we're still talking about it and the technology's gotten better and it's gotten cheaper and it changes the experience when you're in a mobile environment listening to music, because that's where most people listen to music, then maybe.
Yeah.
But short of that, I think you're limited to, like you said, movie theaters or people with home
That's
theater
where it makes
systems and
the
those
most,
kinds of things.
most sense
Yeah.
to me, you know. I think
Yeah.
it's worth
Yep.
looking into any of that and learning a little bit about it. It never
Yeah.
hurts to learn new stuff, even if it's things that you don't implement. Because you might learn something
Yeah.
about it and go, yeah, that's not where I want to go.
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah.
idea. Back to the question was, the niche, finding some sort of niche that you can do either better than everybody else or more efficiently or at a slightly better price without going too cheap. We got to stop this race to the basement on prices because it doesn't help
We
anybody.
can talk about that for an hour.
Yeah.
I know.
God.
And it doesn't help anybody.
No.
All it does is devalue the entire market.
That's
and the
right.
market's already doing that to us. We don't need to keep doing it to ourselves and to
No.
each other, I want
Certainly
you guys
not.
to make more. I don't want to make less. But I
Right.
think it's worth looking into all that stuff. But if you're looking purely from a musical standpoint, just making music in the way that all of us three are making it, I don't think the immersive thing is where to put all your eggs in one basket. I
No,
don't
certainly
think
not.
that's
It's a
smart.
cool technology, and I keep my eye on it. I think it's interesting, but I don't know that it's something that I'm not sitting in my room to mix in Dolby. That ain't happening anytime in the near future.
Yeah, and
Unless,
that's another part of that whole thing with the Atmos too, is the fact that there's people out there like you could invest a shit ton of money in setting up an Atmos studio. Dolby come in and say nope, it's not right, and you don't get certified, and then
There's
you
that.
can't use the name, and then you can't use the name. But you just invested however many thousands of dollars in wiring up a room with however many speakers are involved in, and Dolby comes in and says nope, not good enough, then you're out. And so. That's the other side of it too, is everybody who's jumping on the bandwagon, they'd better be working with Dolby from day one, or you're
Right.
investing in nothing.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you have to do 100% correct from the get-go. You can't get into it and figure it out as you go kind of thing, because that will actually hurt your chances.
I would think so. Yeah, Studio One dude says the average listener will never going to buy into this Dolby we're talking about, because most people are happy with MP3s through cheap earbuds.
Correct.
I would think the average consumer that's absolutely true. People are MP3 is just fine for most people, which is the worst fidelity, typically, speaking, comparatively speaking.
I haven't the times that I've heard the amusive. I'm from Kansas. English not my first language. The immersive music experience, I haven't enjoyed it that much, to be honest with you, because I think at least the stuff that I heard that was done that way tried to use it too much, like they were doing a movie.
Yeah.
And if my favorite ways of listening to music, you don't hear it like that.
Right.
If I'm at a concert, it's fun to hear slapback, or it's fun to maybe hear the crowd around you or things bend. But if I'm listening and it's all right here, and all of a sudden I hear a trumpet over here, and I hear a piano over here. It's distracting to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And it actually took me away.
Yeah. If you turn your head and the entire aspect of what you're listening to changes.
I can't stand that.
I can't, because like, I mean, listen, I'm old. Okay. Listen, I'm going to flat out admit I'm old. Okay. I absolutely am not interested in having an immersive experiencing when I'm listening to music. You know what I mean? I just want to listen to music the way I've done it my whole life. So, I mean, if you're a young, you know, like you're in your teens, 20s, 30s, and you're into that, great for you. I mean, I'm 57 years old. I just want to hear music. You know what I mean? So, and like, because the comment you have up now, mixing an Atmos is fun. I'll bet it is. I'm never going to know. The reason I believe it will stay is because of headphones.
It would just be
I would love to do it. I think it would just be fun. But
he says though, the reason it's going to stay is because of headphones, and the reason I'm not interested in it is because of headphones.
Yeah, I think that's a double-edged sword. It may be what puts it, keeps it around. It also may be what turns people off about it. It all depends on the implementation, really. Right. And so far, I don't think that's there. I don't think that's even really close for the masses yet.
Right. And as it came back to the original question was, would that be a cool thing to really specialize in if you were trying to start a studio business? And I think the answer is, it's cool to learn about it, but I don't, like you were saying, Charlie, I don't think that's where you want to put, you don't want to be riding that new business on that technology. Because
unless you're going for, like you said, doing what Clear Mountain does with the DVDs or the
if you're like doing movie scoring and that kind of thing, that to me would make more sense. But commercial music,
I don't even mean movie scoring. I mean just taking concerts. I do know a couple people that's what they do. It's whether it's still DVD technology or whether it's online streaming music stuff where they're remixing it for Atmos so it can follow people. I know a few people that do quite well, and that's almost all they do, you know.
Interesting.
But I only know a few people. I don't know a lot doing that. So my guess is that market's probably pretty well tied up at the moment by a handful of people.
They get all the work.
Studio
One dude says he's heard that the big mixers are being given money to help defray some of the costs. Of course they are. Well, Bob Clear Mountain's not paying retail price or Crystal Lordology. Those guys are working in partnership with these companies and putting their name and their brand and their studio around that technology. Certainly, of course.
The music business is the single most incestuous freaking business in the world. I mean, you know, everybody's paying, you know, everybody's in everybody else's pocket. That's just the way the business is.
Yeah.
So, you know, Dolby and whoever else is thinking that they're going to make a fortune on this in the long run, of course they're going to be willing to shovel money into it now to get it off the ground if their analysis says it's going to pay off down the road. Yeah, but then again, they have the money to sink into it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like anything, right?
Most of us don't. I don't have the extra money to go do that specifically. So it's a test.
I'm still trying to figure. I want to figure out how I fill the next 500 slot in my, like Charlie was saying.
Exactly right.
I'm trying to come up with $800 for a module. Not 80,000 to put in my Atmos room.
I got 2 empty rack spaces. I plan to fill up with a pair of LE3As. That's where I'm at. Okay,
right.
It's like, you know, that's all I'm thinking about. I mean, I'm a stereo guy, so you know, but yeah, I mean, the whole conversation we're having, it just keeps coming back. I keep, for some reason or other, just keeps coming back to the position I'm in right now, where, you know, I'm a home studio, literally a bedroom studio guy who's never really made a dime off of it yet. And like, I'm teetering on that brink of, I would like to start making money doing this as a mixing mastering engineer. And, you know, like, I'm at the point now where it's like, how, you know, I need to figure out a way to push myself over that cliff, you know?
Right. Well, and some of that, a lot of that is what we've been talking about. It's exposure, it's marketing, it's networking, and it's time. And this is where
the networking is doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, that is probably where I had my most success with getting new artists that I didn't know was literally on Instagram, just going and watching. And this is 5-6 years ago. It was early. There wasn't a whole lot of video yet on Instagram. But I just went through everything, and I'd find someone, go, ooh, I kind of like that artist. Where are they at? And I would try to search my area, which I gave all of LA. And then I would just I'd reach out, I'd send them a message, I'd make it personal. I'd listen to a handful of things to really get an idea. If
Yep.
it's an artist that I could work with, hey, would just listen to this. Love what you did. That video was great. Just want you to know I have a studio, would love to work with you. We could do I could do a lot of different things for you. But even if we don't get to work together, love what you're doing. Best of luck. And that worked out more than anything I've ever done to get new people that I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's networking and that takes time. I mean, that kind of research,
Yep.
those kinds of personally crafted emails and all that stuff, it's time. And so what I tell people that are trying to, we talked about this, I think, Charlie, when I was on your channel last, about how we got new clients and what I used to do to get new clients and how I did it. The biggest thing is most people aren't willing, they don't realize how much time it takes. It's rare that, again, you go from an absolute nobody knows you, and you can have a really good set of skills under your belt to be able to bring people in the door to work with. That amount of upfront, what do we call it? Proactive networking takes time. And it's not easy, and you get rejected in upfront way more than you ever get accepted. It's like being an actor.
Yep.
It's like 9 out of 10 people say no, or you never hear back from, but you have to keep pressing. And what I've found with students that want to kind of go from a hobby to even just a part-time hustle to make enough money to buy extra gear for their studio is they really don't understand the amount of work that it takes, and they give up. They get real motivated for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they realize, holy shit, this takes a lot of work, and it doesn't pay off right away most of the time. And so that's always what it is. It's really just time, and you can't, like they say, you just can't give up. You got to keep going, keep going, keep going. And I'm always like, the last one standing is the one that's going to win. It doesn't mean you have to be the most talented. You got to be talented, but you don't have to be the most talented. And you don't, and price almost doesn't even factor into it. You don't want to be the cheapest guy on the block, but you just got to keep at it. And that's where I see the biggest hurdle for people is, and understandably so. I mean, most people have full-time jobs and families and kids and, responsibilities and, and they're trying to make that switch. And it takes a lot. And a lot of your personal life, the pieces of the puzzle got to kind of fit, again, depending on your lifestyle. And if you're married, you have kids, what do you got going on? A lot of support. There's a lot of things that have to happen to make it happen. But I find the biggest thing is just that you just can't stop. You can't go real balls to the wall for 3 weeks and then not do anything for 3 months. You'll never, ever make it that way. I don't care how talented you are. You just won't. And so before we get
first off, you have to love it. You have to truly love it, or you're screwed from the get-go. You have to have perseverance, which is exactly what you're talking about. And you have to be consistent.
Absolutely have to be consistent. That's probably the number one thing. So now the last part of this kind of conversation is now, okay, should we open a studio? How much does it cost to open a studio? What does it kind of cost to run a studio? And then finally it's like, okay, how do we get clients? And then what do we charge people? How many clients do you have to bring in? What do you have to charge them? Like, we'll use Charlie's kind of, $5,000 a month, $6,000 a month to run my business. And that's not put coffee in the machine. That's not eating. That's just running his building. Yeah. So what is I always know, because we text a lot. You always have sessions coming in and out of there. Now, you've been doing it a long time, but in the beginning, if you can go back to the beginning when you first started, how many, you got to bring a lot of people in, and what do you have to charge? So in other words, if a band, basic 4-piece rock band wants to come into your studio and they want to record a 2 or 3 song demo that they can use to go out and get gigs in the area, whatever. No high production, no full, good production, but we're 2 days in the studio with you to record and to mix for you to mix those songs. What's the average cost of something like that?
I don't really do work like that. I don't do, demo work. To me is just pre-production for the real thing. So, if a band was coming in to do that, it would be like, we're doing it all the way like it's going to be the actual releases, and I would do my demos the same way. I just believe that you do it that way from the beginning, regardless of what you think the outcome is, or you don't do it. So
Yeah,
that's just me, though.
yeah,
So
but
I don't do that kind of demo. We're going to do this just to go get a gig kind of thing. I don't do that quick kind of stuff anymore.
No, but what I
did
mean
a little bit in the beginning.
But what I mean is like blocks it, like we have to come in and rent out your space and rent out you for a block of time. However that process goes, right?
I kind of looked at it like when I was figuring out prices, I wanted to be able to know that, let's say, I could pay all my bills if I had 1 week of work, basically.
Okay.
You know, or 10 days, whatever it was, you know, it's fluctuated over the years, especially with price increases and, you know, upgrades and stuff. But I didn't want to know that I needed, man, I have to work 28 days this month to be able to pay my bills, because you can't do that. Because one, even really successful studios have days off, have days when it's not working, you know?
Sure.
You know, that's just the way it works. So I kind of went, you know, I needed somewhere between, you know, 6 or 7 to maybe 10 days of work. And whether that's physically people in the building, whether that's mixing, you know, whether that's doing some video production, all of that was in there. And some things cost more than others. You know, mixing is one rate, a day in the studio is another rate, live stream concerts is another rate, or I just finished doing a video production for a band that we did about 7 or 8 songs. It's for their demo, their Sizzler reel, where we did full production of everything. Audio, video, that's a different kind of rate, you know. Some of those are more expensive than others. So I factor all that in a little bit, knowing that if I work for, let's just say it's 7 days is what it takes. I know I need to have 7 days of business to cover my bills, and I'm good. Anything beyond that, you know, can go to upgrades, fixing, you know, that's the one thing I didn't consider in the beginning. How many things would need to get fixed?
Right.
And then the other thing is upgrades of what type of work has come in the most? What did I need to be able to do that I couldn't do efficiently enough or couldn't do at all? But now that seems to be happening a lot. So, okay, I need to add the facility to be able to take care of that work because it's something I want to do, which is why I'm finishing building out the back ISO booth. So I have 3 total separate rooms at that point. You know, that was in the beginning. I had meant to do it, never finished it, and never really needed it that much. And over the last year and a half, I've needed it a lot. So, okay, I got to finish that and get that workable now. That costs money. So that gets factored in. So now it was my 7 days of normal work to cover the business. Well, I got to finish that, and that's X amount of dollars. Now this month, it's going to be 10 days because I got to factor in what it's going to cost to do that other room. You know, and there's been times where I've done multiple upgrades. Like this year, there were quite a few. All of this, you know, went in. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to have a few months where I got to work a little bit. Some of it was saved up, you know, but I try not to rely on that too much. I just go, okay, this month I need 14 days of work to cover all of those things I need to get done, you know.
Right. So that works out to be about roughly $700 a day is about, which is what it is. So depending on the work and what you're charging and all that stuff, $700 a day is about the number.
Man, you're good with math, man.
Yeah,
Shit.
so that's I don't do much well, but I can add up numbers.
I'm a drummer. I get past 4 and it gets difficult.
right. So yeah, I mean, but that's a good point. That's a good place to start. So you got to look at, well, what is my monthly expenses? You know, and again, you said you're probably on the lower side of a commercial room where you've
in Los Angeles.
So your expenses are probably maybe 20 or 30% less than what, if you were starting today, what it would be. Right. So there's kind of that's kind of okay. Well, you're anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a day to cover the expenses in that first week, if that's kind of your goal. And then everything above and beyond that, you know, it's all the other stuff. It's like you said, upgrades and whatever else you need to do and actually take home some money and live, you know?
Right. And in the beginning, that was a lot less. I wasn't charging as much, you know, because I was a new space. I mean, even though I had a lot of clients in my old space, I'd been there 10 years. All of a sudden I had all this room and it's a whole new world opens up. Right. But so does my competition. It's trying to get those new clients that are good clients. It was difficult at first. So my prices were way lower, which meant I had to work a lot more to get to that point.
Right.
And then I made the mistake of raising my price too early, too fast.
Oh,
And
okay.
I mean, I did it thinking, okay, it's going well. I got to get the rates up because I thought I could do it at that point. And, I didn't have the clientele yet to support that. And it hurt me. I mean,
Yeah.
it hit me for probably good 3/4 of a year. I was digging back from some of that, where I got into a price range where I was close enough to some of the other mid-level or larger studios, but I hadn't differentiated myself enough either as the person to work with or have whether it was doing drums, I didn't have the room dialed in enough or enough gear to compete with them at that price point. So some people went, well, if it's going to be that much now, shoot, another $100, and I go over here, and all of a sudden you're at the
Yeah.
much bigger, and I had to drop my rates back down, and I tried not to make a big deal out of it, but that also hurt a little bit, that roller coaster, because all of a sudden people were like, well, why are you back down there? And it took a few years, and that was a roller coaster set of years that somehow I made it through and was able to get the people coming in and my portfolio going, okay, wait, here's what we have going. Now I can start showing this to people again and gently get those rates back up. And then offering some other things.
Right, to offset some of the raise in the pricing, some other services. So yeah, pricing is always a tricky thing because there is no one size fits all, and it really depends on a million different factors, as you said. And it's the type of clientele, what kind of clients you're working with, what's typically a budget that they're willing to spend. What can you do? Obviously, your skills have to be at a certain level, but what other things can you offer? And like you said, what is your competition around you, right? Because if you could, like you said, spend a little bit more money and go to a facility that's maybe twice as nice, with twice as much gear or twice as many things, then you gotta kind of look and say, well, if someone could get, X for this amount of money, I can't be too close to that if I can only offer half of what that my competitor's offering. And so sometimes the price has nothing to do with your ability as an engineer.
Exactly.
It really doesn't.
And sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with your space either, because I do have some friends that have either no space whatsoever and always have to use outside studios, or have spaces that are nowhere near what I have here and can charge way more than me. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. It could be personal. People just like a certain person and they've got a track record, and there are people who are willing to pay $1,500 a day or $1,200 a day or whatever it may be. And there are people like that.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's certainly. Let's see, we have some questions here. We're trying to get to some questions here. We do answer questions, Skirt, but your question has nothing to do with the topic that we're talking about. But I'll put it on the screen because you seem to be a little frustrated. So because it's your first time here, we're going to show you some love. So I'm relatively new to all of this. How are your mastering converters connected to be switched? What types of devices are people using to connect and switch converters? I'm not sure I understand the question, how it's written. How are your mastering converters connected to be switched? I'm not sure what that means. Can you guys help me with what that might mean?
I'm not. Maybe if you're using a separate set of converters when you're mastering.
I really don't do mastering work in and of itself. I'm really doing mixing. I'm not a true mastering house, like a high-end mastering house. So I don't have. I guess my answer would be I don't have a separate set of converters that I use just when I'm mastering. If that's.
I do when I'm mixing. I mix through a whole separate set of. It's an old Apogee Rosetta because I love them.
Right.
So I have all my Motus, send everything out to the board, but my print chain goes directly to Apogees hooked up to a second computer.
Yeah,
but that's a real simple thing. It's right.
Yeah, but that's also something you don't need to switch in and out of. You just your signal flow is established that way. Yeah.
Yep. So I have it for my console, my master outs, and it's all in the patch base, so I could route it if I chose to or needed to.
Right.
It's my master out feeds right down into my mix bus chain, which is all hardwired together, which is 3 pieces of gear at the moment. Comes out of there directly into my Apogee. And then the Apogee goes directly into my print machine. So I technically don't even have to patch.
Yeah.
But I can also
yeah.
use that. It's also hooked up to my 2-track. So if I want to use that while we're tracking and I want to listen through that stuff just to make it sound better, I just hit the 2-track button on the console, and then I have to put my Apogee into analog mode. But that's like, I'm not technical. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm really switching much there.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So
Yeah.
hopefully that
But if
answers your
someone's
question.
happy.
Yeah. So if
Yeah.
anyone else has any other questions for any of us, and Charlie in particular, let us know now. We're almost going on an hour and a half. We'll stick around another 10 minutes or so to fish up any questions. Yeah, the whole pricing thing with me was always a struggle as well. I had the same problem of lowering prices, raising prices, and trying to find the sweet spot. And then also not trying to devalue this craft by being racing to the bottom, because that frustrates me. We've talked about that before. It frustrates me as well. I see people that do what I do and they charge, and I don't know how people do that. But so there is a balancing act. And then you have to balance, well, you could charge as much as you want, but if no one's willing to pay it, well, you're right back to I'm out of business.
Well,
So,
that's the other thing too.
Right.
I think that's a really important point to make, is you can only charge what your area or your clients are willing to pay.
Yep.
right.
And
Supply and
that's
demand.
regardless of how much gear you have or
Right.
how much experience you have. If you're not in a place, or not, maybe you are in a big city like Nashville or LA or something, but you don't have that track record yet, you're just you have to charge then what your client's willing to pay, and sometimes that means you go a little lower than you think.
Yeah. And then the last thing around that too, and again, there's two ways to think about, you could be very specific with a niche and you could try to be the best at that thing, which is a lot of people would say to do that. And you could be the expert in that one thing, or, that one style of thing. Or you could kind of go the road of, which I think you do as well, Charlie, is I do multiple things, and there's multiple revenue streams in my business at all different price points. So if one part of the business is slowing down, then the other part of the business isn't. So some of my more expensive services, well, not so much now because we're recovering so much from COVID, but when COVID first hit and people were out of work, and my more expensive services slowed way down because people were freaked out. They had no money and, oh my God, I'm losing my job. And then my more courses and more affordable stuff did a lot better because it was a lot less money for people to spend. And so they didn't feel as it was as much risk. And then it shifted again. Now we're getting back to where people are willing to pay for more higher level production. They're not as freaked out as they once were. And so I find, I don't know if you find this in my business, it goes through patches. I get some months where one part of some of my revenue streams do really well and others don't. And then 6 months later, it's the exact opposite. And then if you're lucky, they're all firing on all cylinders, but they're never always equal. There's always some ups and downs. So I have a more diversified set of revenue streams in my business model, as opposed to just being really great at just that one thing and just laser focus on that one service, if you will.
And I'm kind of trying to get in that. I'm trying to diversify a little bit more now. There's some things I'm working on. But I mean, for me, one of the niche things was drums, because by trade, I'm a drummer.
Right.
So when I put everything in here, it was to have a room that was affordable for a lot of people to come over and get good sounding or great sounding drums without having to go and pay, $1,500 a day at one of the big places. So that's been where a lot of my resources for gear has come in, and a lot of, why, at least initially, I put a lot of things together the way I did was for that reason, which worked quite well, because drums are a pain in the ass for most people to do really good.
Yeah, that's one of the home studio things that are difficult to do, comparatively speaking, to have a more commercial space where you have the space and the right environment, I guess is the right word, set up in the right way. Because you just did a bunch of videos of you rebuilding all your ISO panels and diffusers and stuff, really to enhance the drum sound.
Yeah, well, not just the drum sound, but that's how I did a lot of my testing. But I do a fair amount of live recording in the room too, so it was to improve all of that. But drums are a great way to test how a room reacts.
Yeah, sure.
So it made it easier for me to do, and then some of it was to definitely open up some of the things I did with drum sounds for sure.
Right.
And that took a long time for me to figure out also. The room was always good, but there was always something here or there. I'm like, man, I'm not hearing what I want to hear. And I just couldn't figure out what it was.
Right.
It took a while for my ears to get, tuned in enough or sophisticated enough to identify, okay, this is exactly what I wish I was hearing when this happens and when this happens and when this happens. Okay, now that I've identified that, what do I need to do to fix that? That took me a long time to get there. Well, until recently, really. So 10 years of being here, and I just figured some of that out.
Now the room. Now you like the room.
I got to go re-record everything I've done for 10 years.
That's right. It is a process. It is a process.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap it up here. Let's see. How do you balance having a kid with being in a studio working? I'm just finding out how to get it to work, but I'm interested to see how you all did it. Well, David S.J. doesn't have any children, right, Dave? So you don't have to worry about. So he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah,
Charlie.
I travel light.
What about
I
you,
have
Charlie?
Delilah, so that's what I've got. Yeah.
And she's a handful. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's tough down here.
Yeah. She
has her
keeps
head
she
bit
keeps
by
you
the hard
running.
drive snoring.
Yeah. She keeps you running all over the place in that studio, boy. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, for me, I guess I'm the only one here with a kid. And oddly enough, when I first went full time, when I really made the jump, my daughter was born within 3 or 4 months of that.
Oh wow.
But I have, married. My wife is a career person as well. So we went from two, established careers, making good money, down to where, took a massive pay cut when I first started, but I already had a support system in place. So the answer to your question is I have a wonderful wife and a wonderful support person and it was a lot of planning and a lot of saving. And, these are all calculated risks. I wasn't like Charlie 40 and I said, I'm jumping into this thing with 2 feet. I couldn't do that. I had to do the side hustle for 4 or 5 years before I could really say, now I have enough work that I could take a hit, but I'm not going to take a hit and change. We're not losing our house because I decided I wanted to play in music, so.
Yeah, that would be dumb.
And so having a kid and being in the studio, that's one of the main reasons why I still stay in my home studio, even though it's a completely finished lower level and I don't move to a more traditional space, maybe like Charlie's, is because I do have a kid and I can do a lot more work and it's just walking up the stairs and I don't have that weight of me having to be in another building across town for 12 or 14 hours a day. So it is a balancing act, and I'm just lucky that, my wife and I, we both work from home. She works from home now since COVID. And so it worked out, but it is a balancing act. And when my daughter was young, I was working a lot of hours, man. And my wife did a lot of the heavy lifting when she was a baby. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't have that, there would have been no way I would have been able to do it. It's tough. It is tough. I started at the worst time, the absolute worst time. Baby comes out. Let's change careers. That's basically what I did,
Damn. Yeah.
But, and again, it took about 4 or 5 years of being in this home environment studio and all the things I've done over the years to where I've replaced that income. But it took 4 years, solid years to now where I make more money now than I did when I was working, but it didn't start that way.
Yep.
It didn't start that way. I have a very understanding wife. Let's see.
There was a question a lot earlier, David. Don't even try to go back and try to find it.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, I got it up on my screen. It's Dre asked the standard mixing music analog question. Should I buy an analog summing box or console or stay in the box? I love mixing with plugins, just want some analog color. And that's my video that, I'm always a proponent of putting, if you're looking for analog color on the cheap and easy, just put a preamp on your master bus and mix through that. And that gives you a lot of analog color for a relatively small investment, and it's a very easy hookup. So there is a video on the channel. I can't link to it right now. I got too many screens open as it is. But
it's there.
While we're
there's
talking,
a video
he's over there buying gear.
Yeah, he's buying gear.
Yeah, it's been happening. Trust me. But
I mean, you're right. And I mean, or it depends. Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to say I'm crazy because I went out and bought a console. So I mean, it really depends on. You don't need a console. Let's just say, because people say, should I Do I need to have a console to get that sound? No. I don't know what, Charlie, what's your feeling? Like, I used to be into summing boxes, just summing boxes. I might change my mind on those years ago. I don't really dig summing boxes. I don't think there's enough payoff for what a lot of the good ones cost. I'd say if you look, like I think what Dave just said, if you're looking for some analog color, I say start at the master bus and buy a color box. And I mean a color box, whether it's a good set of pre's, whether it's something like an SSL Fusion or, you know, one of those kinds of things. If you want to put on your stereo bus, mix into it and add some of that electronics and some of those transformers and stuff like that, to get something happening.
That's where you could make the most impact right away, is just on the mix bus. And it is different. I mean, it is quite different going out to an analog chain. And I think in a good way. I mean, I enjoy that.
Yeah.
The summing box thing, I think, would be step 2. I don't think they're all created equal. I do think that a good one can have an effect on the overall space of things. Because back before my first console was an Allen and Heath. We had a 24 channel.
Yep.
And I mixed entirely in the box at this point. And my neighbor at my old studio is this guy, Michael Patterson, who, if you look him up, he's mixed. His resume is ridiculously good. I mean, of all A-list people and movies, man, he's awesome. And he was my neighbor for years. And every once in a while, he would literally just pop his head in the door where I just see his head, and that was it. Hey, have you ever tried doing this? And I'd be like, doing what? What? I don't understand. And he'd walk in. He goes, summit here and just try this. And then he'd leave. And it was awesome. And he had me some on the Allen and Heath, and I never considered. I'm thinking it's an Allen, you know, it's not a Neve or something. He goes, who cares? And I noticed just both Ernesto and I that day, and this was probably mid 2000s, you know, late 2000s, and instantly when we went back and forth between the in the box, and just all we did was faders at 0, send stereo tracks out it, nothing else, and went, oh wow. And
That's different.
This is earlier on in the digital, you know, thing and everything like that. But I do think if you get a good summing mixer, if you want that, what it can do for your width and depth just by running it through there can be beneficial. But I do not think they're all created equal. I think you really have to spend a little more money on that. I think the smarter buy, if you want to dabble in that or make a big impact, is what both of you've already said. Stereo bus, whether it's a set of pre's, which is a great way to do it because you can drive them hard or not, you know, or a Fusion or something that has a few other elements in there. The Wes Audio thing is cool. You know, there's different boxes you could get for that kind of thing. And it would keep your workflow quick.
Exactly. You know? Right. Yeah.
Unless you're crazy. I like the chaos. So it's like,
yeah, well, it's hard to say. Yeah, you really, you know, well, again, it's all, you know, people said you don't need a console. Consoles are fun, and it's more about the workflow of a console and the physical hands-on than it's equally as it is the sound, because to get some of that same kind of sonic characteristic, you could do it with everything we just said. Yeah. It's different, but
it would be different, but it would still be good.
It'd be in the neighborhood. Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right, we're coming up on an hour and a half. So I want to thank Charlie so much, man. Thank you again for coming on.
Man.
We always have fun when you
pleasure.
come here, and I'm sure we're definitely going to have you back because we got to talk about the songs from the studio, because that's going to be really cool. We can't wait to hear all about that craziness that's going on.
I'm going to tell you everything not to do.
Right. Yeah. Don't do all of this. So yeah, make sure you check out all of Charlie stuff. The links will be in the description box below. His YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, and everything else that I can find on him. It's all down below. Go check out his stuff. Show him some support. He'll be back on here soon. And then stay tuned, because Dave and I will be back on in the next couple of weeks, do another live stream. We'll take more questions. We'll talk about other stuff, and make sure you stay tuned to the channel so you know what is coming up in the very near future. Any parting words, guys, before we leave?
Just thank you guys for having me again. Always love doing this.
Cool, man.
Appreciate you coming on, man. I really do. It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. Try to talk about things that a lot of people aren't talking about. So hopefully people enjoyed it. All right, guys, we will see you all soon, and you guys hang on a minute. We'll talk after, and we'll talk to you guys all later.
Sounds good.
See ya.
Good night, guys. God, she snores so